Hello everyone, my name is TheMadScorpyon and welcome to week 2 of Festival of the Lost. We are week 2 out of 3, so keep in mind with this event, if there's anything you need to do, whether it be title related, loot farming related, or otherwise just getting cosmetics from the store, you have 14 more days as of the reset to get access to whatever you need. Heading into the week itself, we don't have any boosters at current, at least according to the pop-ups and variety, which makes me lean to believe that we have something for trials this weekend. That is usually what happens whenever there is absolutely nothing, because typically nowadays there's always something. However, speaking of the something, we do have a new nightfall for this week, which is the Proving Grounds Strike. Now, for some of the uninitiated in terms of the Grandmasters, this might be a bit of a difficult one, but it has been around enough that most other people will not have much of a difficult time getting through this. The reward this week is the Shadow Price Auto Rifle, which I have not kept track of it since its initial refresh for this season. It was refreshed once before and I didn't like what came afterwards, so it's real wishy-washy. It's a decent enough feeling auto rifle, a vertical frame as well, so it does shoot quite straight. The issue is whether or not it has any perks that actually make it really good working. If it has something like jolting feedback, that will be quite a good steal. Otherwise, it'll just have to be accounted for that it is just a solid auto rifle. In terms of the Crucible, in Labs we have Class Clash again. In 6v6 we have Team Scorched and Control, which means with Team Scorched there's likely a weekly challenge soon. In 3v3 there is Showdown and Competitive, and of course the usual slate of Rumble. Keep in mind what I mentioned earlier, it's possible that we do have Trials booster this weekend. Now as well, a slight tinge from the update as well, they did expand the rules of Mercy Ruling, so I expect Mercy Ruling to be a little bit harder nowadays in Crucible and Iron Banner. The weekly featured raids and dungeons and exotic missions. Starting with the featured raids, we have Vow of the Disciple and The Last Wish, which all are available to earn crafted weapons, so if you're still looking for the crafted weapons from each of those prospective raids, I would certainly recommend it. And both of them have an exotic that is RNG related, with Vow of the Disciple dropping the Collective Obligation. I think that is the name. It's either Collected Obligation or something else. It is the essential Void debuff gun. But aside from that, the Last Wish is of course dropping the 1000 Voices, aka Laser Beam of Ignition Death. So keep in mind that in case you're either hunting it out or know somebody that is still hunting those weapons. They are infinitely farmable as long as you have the drive. In terms of dungeons, we have two. One that is kind of ignorable, the other that is quite good. We have Shattered Throne and Duality. In response to Shattered Throne, there really isn't anything going for it here. No red borders to earn or craft, no exotic that is RNG related, it is only quest item, and there is no artifice armor, so it is literally only worth farming the one time through just for the pinnacle drop. Duality though is another case, as it does have at least 2 red border craftable weapons and a sword that is not only droppable, but of course RNG. Also a catalyst to earn from Master Mode, and speaking of Master Mode, it does have artifice armor that you can of course farm. It may not be one of the easier ones to farm, and of course the Galron cheese is deleted, so with that, it is up to your choice whether or not you want to spend some time in Master Duality to farm out Artifice Armor. Now, the exotic mission for this week is the Avalon Nord mission, which I still keep asking if anyone can relate some info. I don't know what drops from the activity itself, if it is red borders, whether or not it's Season of Defiance weapons or not. I already have them all completed, so I wouldn't honestly know, and of course it got introduced into the exotic mission rotator, but didn't exactly make any waves. It just showed up there, so really don't know what is actually happening in there and haven't bothered to actually go in to see. Into the Pinnacle Raid challenges and Variety challenges. Salvation's Edge is starting with Coordinated Efforts, which again, I don't know what that is because I don't spend enough time in Salvation's Edge, even though I managed to get Euphony finally. The Broad challenges, Crota's End is unavailable for some reason. Crota's End is just still not challenged. The Root of Nightmares is the Crossfire challenge from second encounter. King's Fall is Devious Thievery, which I believe was the, War Priest challenge. With Vow of the Disciple being featured, all challenges are active, of course. Vault of Glass is Out of Its Way challenge, which is the Templar challenge. The Deepstone Crypt is the Core 4, which is Tanix challenge. Garden of Salvation is a Link to the Chain, and of course Last Wish is featured. So every single encounter has an available challenge. And keeping with that, Garden of Salvation Master Mode is dropping Strength Focused Armor and Vow of Disciple Strength as well. Keep in mind, with Dares of Eternity, it is currently on Expert Mode, Cabal, Taken, and Crota. And another week brings another set of seasonal challenges, the first being Gun Drinker for crafting tonics of kinetic energy or power weaponry in Idol's Laboratory. Keep in mind, you don't need to use them, you just need to make them, and if you've been using a few of them, you will already have it done. The next is the Buckshot Savior for defeating targets with defeating combatants with shotguns in Onslaught Salvation specifically. So just basically take a shotgun, you could double up, could triple up with Acreus, or Tractor Cannon, just kill things with shotguns in the newest version of Onslaught. Then there is Cold Winds for defeating Guardians with stasis damage specifically in the Crucible. I might say save this for a Mayhem week and just chuck Silence and Squall all the time in case you really want to make it easy, but otherwise take a stasis primary and just kind of go at it. The next is the Boss Battle for defeating bosses in Strikes or Vanguard playlist. Bonus progress for defeating bosses on Advanced difficulty or higher. I would definitely recommend actually doing it this week because the Proving Ground Strike is littered with boss bar enemies throughout. Not to mention the 2 tanks as well as the, final boss. Next is the Energy Disruption for getting final blows with energy slot weapons. Bonus progress for defeating Guardians as always. Just as a reminder, anything event related, whether it be the wizards, the past year's bugs, the dinosaurs, the Gundams that are crap. Regardless, if there's anything you want that is Festival of the Lost in the event tab page, I'd recommend getting it while you can. Because again, with these events, they disappear as soon as this event ends in the next 14 days from the making of this video. So if you want it, get it, because otherwise it will not be back around until the whole next event next year. And for all we know, they might not even run these events anymore, so just keep that in mind. Moving into the Bright Dust store on the front page, we have Reanimated Verve, a shader that is looking quite dark and zombie-ish, although I think on weapons it might look a little bit more undead. It looks a bit too clean to be reanimated specifically. Next is the Nougat Delight, which I think I'm saying that right, but it is kind of a... Oh, I'm actually kind of liking that tone. It reminds me of Gambit Celadon, how it is darker greens with a nice orange glow. I do like how it looks though, 100%. I can get behind this one being used in daily use. The next is a Transmat, which is a personal favorite of mine in case you wanted to drop in and look like a dragon or just, look like a red version of Oryx on spawn, the Batwing Transmat. Again, only available for Festival of the Lost. Get it now, otherwise you won't be able to get it again until next year. Next is the Ghastly Durance, which is basically you just trying to be a ghosty ghoul, rattling chains and just being spooky. But there isn't much to say about this emote. When it ends, you just shake off those chains. The next is Manse Macabre, which is something from last year's Festival of the Lost. It is basically a ship that is supposed to look like a cemetery or a haunted mansion, or both, if they could be. Otherwise, I would flip it upside down because I believe it has a cool underglow to it. But, spooky ship, spiky showers, spiderwebs adorned, and otherwise Festival of the Lost themed indeed. Into the main store, starting with the flares and shaders, we have Chrome Stock, which is from Season of the Drifter, which I believe on weapons and armor specifically, or weapons more specifically, it is just basically a shiny white and blue with some very bright chrome styling. Next is the Archaeo skin. I'm not sure. Archaeo, Randy Orton? Nope. But aside from that, it is a pretty solid looking shader. I would definitely say it's a bit more regal. This could pass for an Iron Banner shader now that I'm actually looking at it too. Next is the Flower Child, which is also from last year's Festival of, I believe. One of those ones that is just a kind of eyesore to look at. I shouldn't have to explain why it looks like an eyesore, but, still an eyesore, regardless. Next is actually, I believe, a new one, Eclipse Tempest, which does have animation to it. As you can see on the robe right here, it does have a bit of a, I don't know how to describe it, a Verve whoosh shader thing. It's animated, that's all I can really say about it. Maybe it's just got clouds to it. But also, otherwise, dark with some purple glows to it. Very, of course, Halloween as always. Dark and purple is an excellent combination. Next for some Transmats. Arachnophile, which is basically just you bursting into spiders. Which, now that I say it out loud, it's actually fortunate for the arachnophobes out there that this isn't showing initially. Then a repeat of the Batwing Transmat we just saw earlier, of course a Batwing, which it's actually turning out to refuse to load. So I might just scroll back to these when they decide to actually load in. There we go, checking with the Arachnophile, of course spawning in with spiders. The Batwing, just to double back to it, spawning in with bat effects and wings. And the Luminous Cocoon, which is basically the spiders but green, in case you need to know how much Bundy reshaders their Transmats. Then into our main ticket items, we have the Trick or Trio, which is new to this year, which is basically the, I don't know what their names, so I'm just going to say the 3 little shits from the Nightmare Before Christmas that worked for, what's his name? I'm forgetting names so much, but basically just you and 2 others just hanging out and just being spooky little craps. Then next is the No Escape emote, the hilarious one from last season, that is basically you running in place and going nowhere, in case you wanted to look like such an utter fool running from a terrible monster. The next is the Interstellar Shell, which is basically a little cartoony, arcadey, 90s themed ghost shell around your ghost being, you know, a little UFO with some circling planets. The next is the Nevermore, a ship that was brand new to this year, and which I quoted as looking lethal and beautiful all at once. It looks like it will slice things apart or just, you know, stab them straight off the bat. Quite exquisite looking, even just natural with no shader. Next up is the Conductive Hubris, which is basically a Frankenstein sparrow. It's kind of hard to see, but there is something in the sarcophagus right here, tomb, test tube, chamber, whatever you want to call it. And essentially an electricity sparrow that leaves behind a trail of electricity in your wake and carries on looking quite sophisticated of Dr. Frankenstein. And lastly, a good one, the Promethean Prelude, which makes, again, speaking of Frankenstein, the Grand Overture looking a little bit more iconic as a Frankenstein's monster type of electricity slug thrower. With that, of course, with this being the go-to weapon for a bunch of people's recommendations on Vesper's Host, maybe it's time to get an ornament in case you wanted to look at a little bit different than base. Next and last and least, as always, a basic ghost projection. But with that, that is everything with the reset update this week. My name is TheMadScorpyon, and I will hopefully see you all in the next one while it's still spooky.